Imagine being born into a room full of people you have never met, and somehow disappointing all of them before you can even open your eyes properly. That was royal life. Long before the future king ever wore a crown, commanded armies, or stared sadly out of rainy palace windows like every exhausted ruler in history apparently enjoyed doing, he was simply a baby. A very important baby. Possibly the most important baby in the entire kingdom. Which sounds nice at first. Until you realize that being a royal baby was less like joining a loving family and more like becoming a government project. The night he was born, church bells rang across the capital city. Messengers rode through muddy roads carrying news to distant towns. Candles glowed in castle windows. Noble families threw celebrations. Bakers made sweetbreads. Wine flowed freely. Somewhere, a man probably shouted, "The kingdom is saved," before immediately falling into a fountain. People were thrilled, because a royal birth meant stability, continuation, survival. A kingdom without an heir was dangerous. Nobles started arguing. Rival families became ambitious. Everyone suddenly remembered they had a distant claim to the throne, which was medieval language for, "I would absolutely start a war over this." So when the baby prince arrived healthy, the entire realm relaxed. Meanwhile, the prince himself was probably just trying to sleep. But sleep was already becoming difficult. From the very beginning, his life belonged to other people. Even the royal nursery was crowded. Wet nurses, servants, doctors, priests, tutors, guards, and noble visitors constantly moved through the rooms. The prince was almost never alone. Silence barely existed inside the palace. And privacy? That was basically a myth. Royal families did not raise children the way ordinary people did. In many kingdoms, noble babies were handed to wet nurses almost immediately. Mothers, especially queens, often saw their children less than people imagine. That sounds cold today, but for royal families, children were tied directly to politics and survival. Emotional closeness was not always the priority. Duty came first. Boys. The prince learned this very early. Not through speeches, of course. Babies are famously terrible at understanding speeches. But through routine. Everything around him operated on strict schedules. Feeding times. Sleeping times. Bathing times. Presentation times. Yes, presentation times. Because nobles often visited simply to look at the royal child. Imagine being 3 years old and already expected to greet powerful politicians politely. Honestly exhausting. As he grew older, the palace slowly transformed into a classroom. Not the fun kind with colorful drawings and snack breaks. More the kind where everyone speaks softly and acts like the future of civilization depends on whether you sit correctly. Which, to be fair, they believed it did. The young prince was taught posture before freedom. Ceremony before play. Obedience before personality. Even his clothing was uncomfortable. Royal children wore miniature versions of adult noble clothing. Tiny embroidered jackets. Heavy fabrics. Stiff collars. Layers of silk and velvet. Very fancy. Very expensive. Probably very itchy. Meanwhile, ordinary village children were outside chasing chickens through muddy streets and accidentally falling into rivers. Strangely enough, they may have been having a much better childhood. Inside the palace, the prince's world remained carefully controlled. Servants opened doors for him. Guards followed him through hallways. Tutors corrected his speech. Priests instructed him on morality and divine duty. He was constantly reminded that he was special, which sounds flattering until you realize it also meant he was never allowed to be normal. Every action mattered. If he laughed too loudly, someone noticed. If he frowned during a ceremony, someone discussed it. If he sneezed near an ambassador, 5 nobles probably spent the evening debating whether it was an insult to another kingdom. Court life was deeply dramatic and incredibly tiring. The palace itself did not help. It was enormous, cold, and strangely impersonal. Giant stone corridors echoed with footsteps day and night. Candles flickered against tall walls. Servants moved quietly through endless rooms carrying trays, letters, firewood, and gossip. Especially gossip. Palaces ran on gossip almost as much as they ran on money. The prince quickly learned that words traveled fast. Faster than horses sometimes. A careless comment at breakfast could become a rumor by dinner. So he became cautious, careful, measured. Unfortunately, those are not qualities that usually make childhood fun. Still, there were small moments of peace. Sometimes early in the morning, before the palace fully woke, he could sit beside a window and watch the city outside. Bakers lighting ovens. Merchants preparing carts. Thin smoke rising into the cold air. Ordinary life. Free life. People out there could walk where they wanted. Speak casually. Eat without ceremony. Sleep without guards standing outside their doors holding spears for 12 straight hours. The prince envied that more than he would ever admit. Not that he fully understood the feeling yet. Children rarely have words for loneliness. They simply feel it quietly. And despite being surrounded by hundreds of people, the prince often felt alone. Part of the problem was trust. Everyone treated him carefully because of what he represented. Servants bowed. Tutors praised him. Nobles smiled too much. Even other children from noble families behaved strangely around him. Nobody wanted to offend the future king, which meant very few people acted naturally. Real friendship became difficult. The prince slowly realized that people were often speaking to the crown before they were speaking to the person underneath it. That realization would follow him for the rest of his life. As the years passed, palace rules became stricter. He learned formal greetings, religious rituals, noble family histories, dynastic politics, proper dining etiquette. There were rules for standing, rules for sitting, rules for walking into rooms. At this point, medieval royalty honestly seemed one step away from creating official breathing instructions. And perhaps somewhere they did. By the age when most children were still exploring forests or climbing trees, the prince already understood something important about his future. His life would never truly belong to him. One day he would inherit the throne. Everyone reminded him constantly. The kingdom depended on him. The royal bloodline depended on him. Stability depended on him. A crown waited for him long before he was old enough to understand its weight. And slowly, quietly, the palace began shaping him into exactly what the kingdom needed. Not necessarily what he wanted. Not even what would make him happy. But what would keep the great machine of monarchy alive. Because that was the strange truth hidden beneath royal luxury. The prince lived surrounded by gold, silk, music, and enormous feasts. Yet from the very beginning, he was trapped inside a cage no ordinary person could see. A golden cage. Beautiful. And locked from the outside. The palace was never truly quiet. Not during the day. Not during the night. Not even during snowstorms when the entire city outside seemed frozen still. Somewhere inside those endless halls, somebody was always awake. A servant carrying candles. A guard changing posts. A cook preparing bread before sunrise. A messenger arriving muddy and exhausted after riding through the rain all night. The palace breathed like a living creature. And the young king, though he did not wear the crown yet, lived trapped inside its stomach. From the outside, the royal palace looked magnificent. Tall towers, giant gates, colorful banners waving proudly above stone walls. Visitors arriving from distant lands often stared at it in complete amazement. And honestly, fair enough. It was beautiful, but living inside it was another matter entirely. Because the palace was not designed for comfort. It was designed for power. Every hallway, staircase, throne room, chapel, dining hall, and courtyard existed to remind people who ruled the kingdom. The building itself was political theater. Even the ceilings were trying to intimidate you. The prince noticed this more as he grew older, especially during ceremonies. Nobles would enter the great halls and immediately lower their voices. Ambassadors walked carefully across polished floors as if afraid the walls themselves were listening, which in a way they were. Palaces collected secrets the way fireplaces collected ash. And there were a lot of secrets. The prince learned early that hundreds of people lived inside the royal residence. Servants, cooks, guards, musicians, priests, advisors, noble guests, cleaners, scribes, tutors, and soldiers all moved constantly through the palace like blood flowing through veins. Most of them barely slept, especially the servants. Royal life looked glamorous mostly because exhausted workers made sure nobody saw the unpleasant parts. At dawn, long before sunlight touched the palace towers, the day already began. Kitchen fires crackled awake. Water buckets were carried through dark corridors. Candles were replaced. Floors were swept. Fresh wood burned in fireplaces. Then came the royal waking ceremony. Even waking up had rules. For ordinary people, mornings usually involve confusion, regret, and wondering why humans invented work. For royalty, mornings involved audiences. In some royal courts, servants entered the royal bedchamber in carefully organized groups. Certain nobles had the honor of helping the king dress. Others presented clothing. Some simply stood nearby because tradition declared it important. Imagine trying to wake up peacefully while 12 people stare respectfully at you putting on socks. Absolutely horrifying. The prince hated these rituals when he was young. But resistance was pointless. Ceremony controlled palace life completely. Every action mattered because every action sent a message. If the prince appeared cheerful, rumors spread that the royal family was confident. If he seemed tired, whispers of illness moved through the court by lunchtime. If he skipped a meal, somebody probably assumed war was coming. Royal courts were not calm places. They were giant anxiety machines decorated with expensive carpets. Meals were especially exhausting. The prince rarely ate alone. Large public dinners filled the evenings with noise, music, conversation, and endless observation. Nobles watched carefully to see where important guests sat. Tiny seating arrangements could start enormous political arguments. One ambassador seated too far from the king might spend 3 months feeling insulted. Human beings have always been surprisingly dramatic about chairs. The prince learned quickly that dinner was never just dinner. It was strategy. Every smile meant something. Every conversation carried hidden meaning. Even dancing during celebrations could affect alliances between noble families. Meanwhile, the prince often just wanted bread and silence. But silence was rare inside the palace. Even late at night, sounds echoed through the halls. Footsteps against stone floors. Distant doors opening. Wind brushing against tall windows. Guards speaking quietly beside staircases. Sometimes the prince wandered sleepless through dim corridors lit only by candles. Those were the few moments when the palace almost felt honest. During the day, everything was performance. Bright clothing. Formal greetings. Ceremonial behavior. At night, the masks slipped slightly. Servants sat rubbing their tired feet beside kitchen fires. Guards yawned during long shifts. Old advisors quietly complained about politics over cups of wine. The palace became human again after midnight. The prince preferred it that way. Still, there was something unsettling about the building after dark. The corridors stretched endlessly. Portraits of dead rulers watched silently from the walls. Drafts moved through ancient stone passageways. And the palace never truly slept because power never truly slept. Messages arrived at all hours. Political arguments continued deep into the night. Somewhere in the building, nobles whispered about alliances, marriages, taxes, or war. The prince slowly understood an important truth. A kingdom was not ruled only from the throne room. It was ruled through conversations behind closed doors. That realization made trust difficult, especially because gossip spread faster than disease inside the court. Servants overheard secrets. Advisors leaked information. Noble families competed constantly for influence. A careless joke could become tomorrow's scandal. The prince once learned this the hard way after complaining about a visiting lord's terrible singing voice. By evening, half the palace believed the royal family hated that lord's entire bloodline, which was awkward. From then on, the prince became quieter, more cautious. He measured his words carefully, even as a child. Unfortunately, this only made court life feel lonelier. Outside the palace walls, ordinary people laughed loudly in taverns. Farmers argued openly in markets. Children ran freely through muddy streets. Inside the palace, almost everyone was pretending to be loyal, pretending to be confident, pretending not to hate each other during banquets. And the prince slowly joined the performance too. He learned how to smile politely while bored, how to greet people he disliked, how to sit through endless ceremonies without falling asleep. Honestly, that last skill may have been the most impressive, because ceremonies could last for hours. Religious festivals, diplomatic receptions, formal announcements, noble gatherings, military celebrations. Sometimes it felt like the entire kingdom survived entirely through meetings. Yet despite all the noise, crowds, and constant activity, the prince often felt isolated. Hundreds of people surrounded him every day. Very few actually knew him. That was the strange thing about palace life. The closer someone stood to power, the less honestly people behaved around them. The prince noticed servants lowering their eyes nervously. Noble children speaking carefully around him. Tutors avoiding disagreement. Everyone feared offending the future king, which meant nobody relaxed around him. Not fully. And slowly, the palace itself began shaping his personality. He became formal, controlled, quiet, a child learning how to live like a symbol instead of a person. By the time he reached adolescence, he understood something deeply sad about royal life. The palace gave him luxury, education, protection, and status beyond imagination. But in exchange, it took nearly everything simple. Privacy, freedom, trust, silence. And sometimes, on sleepless nights while cold rain tapped against the palace windows, the prince wondered whether the enormous building surrounding him was truly a home at all, or simply a very beautiful prison that never turned its lie. TS off.